Hi, I'm Gidon from technologyman.com. There are two versions of this new ultra-wide monitor from LG, the 29WK500 and the 29WK600 that I'm reviewing here. They are both 29-inch IPS displays with a resolution of 2560 by 1080 pixels. They both come with two HDMI ports, but the 600 variant adds a DisplayPort and also has HDR10 support for gaming and streaming with high dynamic range or HDR. Dual and triple monitor setups have been popular for a long time, but ultra-wide monitors with their 21:9 aspect ratio offer a versatile single screen alternative, and without any screen bezels in the way, which is a real boon, particularly for gaming. With this 2560 by 1080 pixel screen, you're not getting as much resolution as even a dual Full HD monitor setup, but it could well be enough. I'll cover this in more detail shortly. It's a simple procedure to attach the curved stand to the monitor. The support arm screws in the back with two Phillips screws, and the stand itself is attached with a thumb screw. The stand has an elegant design. The matte white back panel may not be to everyone's taste, but at least the finish doesn't attract fingerprints. The stand has no height adjustment. You'll have to move up to the 34-inch 29WK600 for that. There is some minimal tilt adjustment, just 5 degrees back and 15 degrees forward. If you want more adjustment, the monitor does have standard 100mm by 100mm VESA mounting holes for any display mount of your choosing. I'm connecting via the included white HDMI cable to an NVIDIA GTX 970 graphics card, but it's worth checking your computer has an HDMI or DisplayPort to connect to. Most recent computers will, but if it's a slightly older desktop computer without, you could always upgrade with a cheap graphics card. The monitor uses an external power supply, which is in fact a standard 19 volt 3.4 amp laptop power supply, so it should be easy to replace if the need ever arises. Switching on for the first time, the display looks impressive. There is a 1cm bezel around the screen, but this doesn't detract from the design. The matte display does a very good job of limiting any glare coming in from a large window to my side and a bright light bulb above. The monitor has a very easy to use OSD or on-screen display joystick to navigate through the menu system, the best I've used. Although initially the only thing you'll probably want to adjust is the brightness, which defaults to an eye-straining 100%. To access the menu system, press the joystick and move right to settings. There are 10 picture modes, with the default custom colour mode being the only one that allows colour calibration, which I'll discuss shortly. It also has the most accurate colours, so I'd suggest leaving it as is in most cases. Unfortunately, although the monitor will remember your settings in each mode, there is no way to save them as a preset. The monitor has audio built in, but don't expect too much from the small integrated speakers. The audio sounds quite clear, but there's no bass. It's passable for watching a spoken YouTube video, for example, but not much else. The OSD joystick controls the volume independent of the Windows controls. More usefully, there's also a headphone port to attach headphones or some speakers, much improved sound. One of the main reasons to get an ultra-wide screen is for productivity. Just using the Windows Snap Assist feature lets you divide the screen in up to 4 areas. Drag the title bar of a window to the left or right of the screen to snap a 50% size window to either side, or use the Windows key plus the left or right arrow. Drag to a corner of the screen to snap a window to that quadrant of the screen, or use the Windows key and an up or down arrow after snapping to the left or right side of the screen. With this wide aspect display, you can comfortably work with a side-by-side split, a document on the left and a web browser on the right-hand side, for example. In this case, each window will be 1280 by 1080 pixels, which I find enough in most cases. If you want more control, LG provide their OnScreen Control software, which lets you customize your display with options for 2, 3 and 4 screen splits, and a picture-in-picture split that keeps the window on top, for example for a YouTube video continuing to play in the background. You then drag a window to the predefined split area. You can even configure specific applications to load on Windows Startup in a predetermined screen zone. The LG software also allows you to control the monitor without using its joystick, and you can configure specific applications to use specific picture modes. The software works very well, although the built-in Snap Assist features of Windows may well be enough. And if you want even more control over your screen space, you could use Display Fusion, which provides the ultimate Windows management controls and customization, albeit at a cost. The monitor has an IPS panel, which is superior to most cheaper TN displays for colour accuracy and viewing angles. Viewing angles are particularly important for widescreen displays like this one, and in general use and viewing test images, I did find the viewing angles to be very good. The maximum brightness is quoted as 300 candelas per square metre, which whilst not as bright as some monitors, is plenty bright enough for a desktop monitor in most cases. Unlike your phone or laptop screen, it's not being used outdoors. Unless you're in a very bright room, it's recommended to reduce the brightness to around 120 to reduce eye strain. On this monitor, that's around 40% brightness in custom picture mode. Using an x-rite i1 Display Pro monitor calibrator, I measured the maximum brightness in the default custom mode as 265 candelas per square metre. The brightest picture mode was HDR Effect, which pushed the brightness to 380 candelas per square metre. The monitor is also claimed to display 99% of the sRGB colour space, which is a spectrum of colours that most devices conform to, from phones to TVs to monitors. Again, using the i1 Display Pro, I calibrated the monitor for the most accurate colours possible. I achieved a value of 97.4% of sRGB, so close enough within the accuracy of my testing and a good result. More importantly, I also measured the colour accuracy, or delta E, of the monitor. Delta E is a metric for understanding how the human eye perceives colour difference, with a value of less than 1 being not perceptible to the human eye, and a value between 1 and 2 being barely perceptible. I measured an average delta E of 0.52, which is very impressive. An average delta E of less than 2 is considered very good. Even the maximum delta E was only 1.53. High dynamic range is a relatively new feature of monitors that expands the contrast and colours of the image with the intention of providing more realism. The term comes from photography, where multiple photos are taken at different exposures and combined to create an image with an increased dynamic range. So for a high contrast image of a landscape, for instance, an HDR photo could reveal lots of details in the foreground, yet still have the correct exposure for the sky. There are various HDR standards, including HDR10, Dolby Vision and HLG, with HDR10 being the most widely supported currently. This monitor is listed as supporting HDR10, although if you look into this more closely, it appears to support more a subset of the HDR10 standard. There is a new display compliance standard called Display HDR from VESA, which defines minimum criteria for various levels of compliance. This monitor doesn't appear to even meet their minimum standard, Display HDR 400. Whether this is of real concern for most users is not really clear, but it's worth mentioning. To actually experience HDR, you also need HDR content, either HDR enabled games or HDR video content. There aren't that many games that have HDR support, although I'm sure that will change. Battlefield 1 supports both HDR10 and Dolby Vision, so I was able to try it out. Loading the game automatically recognised the HDR capabilities of the monitor, and the monitor OSD showed HDR. It's then possible to choose one of 4 HDR picture modes, with the default being HDR Vivid. The game does look really good, with incredibly vibrant colours, perhaps too vibrant for a game like Battlefield 1, but impressive nonetheless. Playing HDR content within Windows is more complex. Firstly, you need to enable HDR mode in Windows from Settings, Display, and switching on HDR and WCG. You'll again see the monitor OSD display HDR. Since most content you'll be viewing will still be standard dynamic range SDR and may look a little dark, you can adjust the brightness for SDR content slider under HDR and WCG settings. I had an issue with the Google Chrome browser looking dark and grey, which I fixed by turning off hardware acceleration under Settings in Chrome. I thought this was an issue with my NVIDIA GTX 970 graphics card, but I also tried with another computer which had an AMD RX 470 and again had to turn off hardware acceleration. This issue does highlight how HDR support is still in its infancy within Windows. The easiest way to view some HDR footage is in YouTube. It's mostly demo clips, but the HDR channel has various promotional clips, and when it's all working they do look very vibrant, almost jumping out of the screen at you. YouTube would automatically switch to the HDR version of the clip, which you can see under the quality settings, although I only got this to work in Chrome. Microsoft Edge wouldn't play the HDR versions with both the GTX 970 and the RX 470. Enabling Stream HDR video in Settings, HDR and WCG settings, video playback settings didn't help. Amazon Prime and Netflix both have HDR content, but neither will work on my setup at least. Amazon Prime HDR content is only available on a very limited supported hardware list, and Netflix has a help article hidden away that states you'll need at least the latest generation NVIDIA GTX 1050 or above discrete graphics card, or a very recent 7th generation Intel i3, i5 or i7 processor. If the situation improves and you want to switch to Windows 10 HDR mode, I'd recommend disabling any colour profiles you may have enabled and also changing the picture mode to HDR standard for best results. I only dabble in gaming, but for games that support the 21:9 format of this monitor, it's very immersive. The resolution jump from 2560 by 1080 from Full HD is not a big challenge for most graphics cards, which also means you shouldn't need an upgrade for games that already play smoothly at the lower resolution. I did feel a little sick playing very fast FPS games like Doom. I'd recommend paying close attention to the field of view options and increasing the angles slightly to a value that suits you. If you're into cycling and have ever tried the virtual cycling game Zwift, the extra screen space is also very welcome. It looks less cluttered and also provides more immersion. The monitor supports FreeSync, which only works with AMD graphics cards, but reduces any screen tearing and stuttering in-game, where the graphics card can't keep up with the refresh rate of the monitor. It only operates from 40Hz to the monitor's maximum refresh rate of 75Hz, which makes its use a little limited. My main gaming computer has an NVIDIA card, so I had to try the feature out with my children's gaming PC that has an AMD RX 470. I can't say I really noticed a huge difference in the games I tried, but it's a nice feature to have nonetheless if you already own an AMD graphics card. There are some huge benefits of an ultrawide monitor, mainly for productivity, but also for gaming. The LG 29WK600 monitor represents a very good value proposition with excellent colour accuracy, good connectivity, generally useful screen organisation software, and a clean, elegant design. The slightly cheaper LG 29WK500 doesn't have the HDR to support and loses a DisplayPort connection. It is probably the better option unless the prices are very close. HDR support, particularly in Windows, has a long way to go, but does future-proof the monitor somewhat, and games that support it do look impressive. Overall, I'd not hesitate to recommend either monitor. I hope you have found the video useful. Please do like and subscribe if you did, and take a look at thetechnologyman.com for the written review, which includes a summary of the pros and cons of the monitor. Thanks for watching.